Okay. Right, well, thank you very much for coming along tonight, and welcome to the West Northamptonshire Shadow Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We have quite a busy agenda tonight, lots of ICT and looking at websites and the programme to introduce the promotion and publicity for the new unitary authority. So, first of all, can I ask if there's any other apologies? We just have Councillor Flavel. Councillor Addison is here. Are there any other apologies? I don't think so. That's lovely. Just Councillor Flavel. There are no notifications of requests to address the meetings. Do we have any members' declarations of interest?
Nobody's indicating, Chair.
Thank you, Tracy. Right, Chair's announcements. I think the only thing I have to say really is to introduce everybody. We have Richard Ellis, who's the Chief Exec of South Northamptonshire, South Northampton Council, and he's responsible officer for ICT, and Karen Pettit and Katie Jones and Cheryl, I've lost your surname, Cheryl, I'm sorry. Cheryl Doran will be speaking on those two items. Promotion and publicity, we have welcomed Jonathan Nunn, Councillor Jonathan Nunn, our leader at Northampton Borough Council, and Claire Hazelgrove will be talking about the promotion and publicity later on in the meeting. We also have Andrew Hunkin here tonight, who is here in place of George Candler and the monitoring officer, Catherine. Again, I don't have a surname for Catherine, but she has she's not able to be here with us. So we have Democratic Services as well, Alex, Ed, and Tracy Tiff. So those are all the people that we have with us tonight, and thank you for coming along. Just one more thing with Chair's announcements. Tracy is going to send out a list of all our forthcoming meetings. Everybody's getting very busy with meetings, and I think this will help us with putting things into our diaries and making sure that we're able to manage those and not miss meetings. So thank you, Tracy, for keeping us informed of all the things that we have to be doing. Right, on to item number 5, the minutes of the last meeting. Has everyone had a chance to look at these, and are there any comments arising from those? I don't see anybody's hand up or anybody indicating. Can we take those minutes as accurate then?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, can I hand over to you, please, Richard? Thank you for coming along tonight. I've done a very brief introduction, but you're probably going to tell us a little bit more about what you're doing, what's the work that you've been involved in, and tell us all about the ICT and the website development.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Yes, it was quite difficult to know where to start, really, because these two programmes are massively complex, and I suppose they're very much corporate programmes reaching across the whole of both organisations. So obviously we've sent out a report in advance, so hopefully members have had the opportunity to read the sort of highlights there, but equally we've pulled together a brief presentation tonight just to pull out some of the sort of salient points. And obviously welcome any questions as at the end of each session. If members could actually leave their questions until the end of each section, that would be really helpful, just so we get the flow. If we can just move on to the next slide, it gives the agenda for this evening. So the ICT strategy and day one preparedness, the brief was around IT preparedness, but we couldn't really separate the two because I think what our whole sort of principle at the outset was you need to understand what your vision is and what your long-term destination and overall ICT strategy is before you can start working on the sort of individual programs of work and individual system integrations and migrations. So we've sort of outlined in the slides that we'll go through that ultimately the direction that we're looking to go in, and probably over the next at least 2 to 3 years. And day one is just a milestone within that that overall program. So again, at the end of that presentation, we've just got a couple of slides which gives you an idea on our progress on all of the different work streams within the ICT program. And conversely, the customer contact and digital program again is quite wide-reaching, but you've asked us to come and report specifically on the website, so that's what Katie will be going through a bit later on as well, specifically. So at that point, I'm going to hand you over to Karen, I think, who's going to be taking you through, and obviously Cheryl will be contributing as necessary. So thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, Cheryl is starting.
Oh, it is Cheryl. Okay.
We'll move on to the next slide then, please. So I'm going to cover the strategy part, and Karen's going to go through what's been happening on day one. When we were looking at the strategy, obviously Richard said we need to have a vision about where we're moving, and we wanted to make sure any tactical things we put in place for day one actually help to move towards that vision, rather than just being tactical and reactive to get to a point in time. We wanted them to be contributing towards a wider vision. So obviously the drivers for change there listed. We've obviously got the unitary organisations, but there's also this thing around customer expectations now with online services. They want things much faster, more accessible, higher quality. And employees and members have got expectations for having things that are intuitive and easy to use compared to some other systems that we've maybe used 10 years ago or so. There's a trend to extend the reach of those services, things for personalising your service, and also funding pressures to do more with less. And lots of new technology on the market, which is potentially quite disruptive and exciting, and we wanted to make sure that when we were looking at the strategy, we made room for that. So next slide, please. So pulling all that together, we tried to theme that so we could see where we were benefiting in different areas. So a theme around benefiting customers, a theme around benefiting employees and members, and a theme around the organisation itself and how it operates. And then just across the whole piece is being able to innovate and just do things differently and collaboratively and just change the status quo. So that this helps us to try and organise what sort of things we needed to do in the future. So next slide, please. Can't hit the vision all in once, so we've broken it down into 3 phases. This slide just takes you through that. So the first phase is prioritise, and that is getting ready for vesting day. So that milestone Richard refers to is vesting day, and that is our prioritise phase. So things we need to do for safe and legal. The next phase is around standardising, so that's bringing together those organisations into West Northamptonshire Council. And then the final phase is that blast through and transform. Tonight we'll just be focusing on that prioritise phase, but we'll give you a sneak preview of what's in standardise. Next slide, please. And just a little bit more detail on those themes. So when we talk about the customer part, this is a focus on providing end-to-end digital services that customers will want to use by choice. And then there'll be multi-channel services. So where it's not a choice, the staff in West Northamptonshire Council can support those customers to transact with the council. And we'll enable that with an integrated digital customer platform. In the next The next box, empowered employees and members. This is about giving staff and members the right tools and information they need to do their job, regardless of what time it is, where they are, or what device they're on. And the enabling technology that will underpin that is the Microsoft 365 platform and making sure everyone's got a fit for purpose device. The next one is excited organisation. This is about insight and giving everyone the data, giving the organisation the data it needs. That's quite a big piece. Not much of that will happen before vesting day, but again, it's just showing you that what we're thinking about is the future state and how we can support the organisation moving forward. And then on the final one, innovation and automation, this is about managing demand, maybe predicting what might happen in the future, taking interventions to prevent that from happening, which will not only benefit residents, but also save money. Just being really disruptive and thinking about things differently, using some of that new technology to do some really creative and exciting stuff. Moving on to the next slide, please. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this one because it'll steal Karen's thunder too much, but this is the day one programme for ICT. You can see there is a lot of work in there for day one, mostly centred around those three themes. So it's organised around those three themes for you. Next slide, please. And these are in the standardised phase. So these are the priorities for post-vesting day. So getting that digital customer platform fully in place, being able to look at proactive and preventative demand, and increasing the amount of digital services that are available. In the employees side of things, we'll be looking at some exciting integration for telephony, having a room booking solution across the unitary, and creating a data management, data science capability. And in the organisation, we'll be looking to rationalise the number of systems that we've got. So if you think about the district services, we'll have 3 of each of those, we'll want 1. So quite a lot of work involved in bringing those together. And then finally, looking at some interesting projects that could be done in the innovation space. And next slide, please. It's over to Karen.
Good evening. So the ICT programme is delivering a number of projects for vesting day. Some of the projects affect the majority of users across the 8 authorities, whilst others affect specific areas, service areas only. We're currently carrying risks around resourcing in some areas and technical risks in others. Each of the 8 authorities have their own unique technical environments, and some have had and some may still need to implement some technical changes to accommodate some of the new technologies being introduced. We are making good progress in some projects, but have missed a few milestones in others. So we're currently reporting as amber as we work through the risk mitigations that are in place. The following slides show high-level milestones for each of the projects within the ICT programme, and I would now like to take you through an overview of each project, starting with Microsoft 365. So all users across the authorities will need a new email address from vesting day, and currently all the authorities use Microsoft to deliver their email solutions. A decision was made to implement the latest Microsoft cloud technology called Microsoft 365. By implementing a cloud solution, this means that there will no longer be a requirement to support the system in one of the current data centers. And it also means that users, as long as they have an internet connection, can access their emails from anywhere and on any device. The Microsoft 365 solution also includes the ability to chat online with colleagues, video call colleagues, regardless of their location. It has remote meeting facilities that will replace Zoom, and a SharePoint site which will allow documents to be stored and shared in a central location. As the technology is new and affects all users, we had planned to switch over all 8 authorities to Microsoft 365 by the end of December. This was both to free up ICT resources from January onwards and also to give the ICT teams time to adopt and support the new technology. Our current position is that to date, we've switched over 5 of the districts and boroughs, with South Northants scheduled for this weekend. We have not been able to schedule Northampton Borough Council and the County Council before the end of December for a number of reasons. With Northampton Borough Council, it was highlighted that their bandwidth was under some stress due to the amount of users working remotely and already using remote meeting technology. To ensure that by introducing Microsoft 365, it wouldn't impact further and potentially slow down response times for users, an upgrade of their bandwidth was ordered. This upgrade took place last weekend, and we are now currently on schedule to switch over Northampton Borough Council users on the 8th of January. And as the County Council has the largest amount of users, they're currently undergoing a health check on their environment to ensure that it is fit for purpose also for the new 365 technology. And to give us time to make any potential adjustments, the switchover date is now scheduled for the 22nd of January. I would like to mention that as each switchover has taken place, the lessons learned from each has been invaluable to improve the following ones. Also, we now have a team across the districts and boroughs who play an active role in assisting with the other switchovers and who also provide data support for Microsoft 365. Also, as this project affects the majority of users across the authorities, we have a change management team who are heavily involved in the comms in the run-up to a switchover and in supporting users to adopt the Microsoft 365 functionality after. We are also now offering one-to-one training sessions for councillors as well. The next project we are delivering is 2 separate instances of the current County Council's education system for West and North. The County Council currently use Capital One, and we're supporting the system within their data centre. The system has now been successfully moved into the cloud in line with the ICT strategy, and this work happened over the last weekend. The next stage is to split the data into 2 separate instances for vesting day, and that work is currently underway, and this project is currently on track. The next project is the local land and property gazetteers. Each of the district and boroughs are responsible for maintaining their own local land and property gazetteers, which is their central corporate database for all addressing used in their respective authorities. Each of the districts and boroughs are responsible also for providing regular updates to the National Land and Property Gazetteer. From vesting day, there can only be one update from each of the 2 new unitaries, so work is currently underway to consolidate the West District and Borough's local land and property gazetteers together and the North District and Borough land and property gazetteers together, and this project is also currently on track. Can I have the next slide, please? The Eclipse system is the new hosted adult social care system, which went live on the 7th of December as part of the County Council's Adult Social Care Transformation Programme. The next stage is to create 2 instances for West and North for vesting day. The original solution from the supplier to provide 2 instances whilst using one system has proven to have security and business process issues. So we will now be implementing 2 separate Eclipse systems for the West and North. The contracts are due to be signed this week, and we have received a revised high-level plan from the supplier. We are currently showing this project as amber as we continue to develop the testing plan and the resources that will be required to carry out the testing. The success of the launch of the Eclipse system on the 7th of December was down to the services following a detailed testing plan to identify and rectify any anomalies before the system went live. And we're using this testing plan and modifying it to understand any additional resources that may be required to test the 2 new systems. We also have some contingency time built into the new plan to allow for any extra time that may be required to ensure the systems are fully tested before vesting day. We're also delivering consolidated finance, HR, payroll, and accounts payable and receivable solutions for the West and North. The solutions will also provide self-service functionality, which will allow staff to book leave and view their payslips online. As this project affects the majority of staff across the authorities, again, there is a detailed change management and training programme in place to support staff in adopting this system, and this project is also currently on track. The next program, the next project is income management, where we will be creating 2 separate instances of the current County Council's income management system. This is to ensure that payments received after vesting day are updated in the correct new financial systems for the West and North, and this project is also currently on track. For the new devices project, a new procurement framework agreement is currently being put in place to ensure any new devices that are rolled out meet the minimum technical specification to allow users to have a good experience when using some of the new technology that is being introduced. An audit has been conducted across the authorities to identify any current devices that do not meet the new technical specification, and 1,200 have been identified. Of these devices, some will need to be upgraded and some will need to be replaced. We're currently showing this project as amber, as we need to plan not only for the technical resources to be available, but also how we will physically get the devices to the users whilst the majority continue to work remotely. Planning is due to start in January, with a number of potential options being considered for this. We are also starting the design of the new interim intranet sites for the West and North. For vesting day, we will be providing 2 separate intranet sites which will hold unitary information, policies and procedures, but would also allow access to the Sovereign Council intranets until such time as they have all been aggregated, and this work will start after vesting day. Our last milestone is to send out a survey to all members to understand what their current ICT solution looks like and any preferences they may have for future ICT for councillors. The results of the survey will then go into the decision-making process within the Transformation Task and Finish group. The ICT programme is also supporting a number of business system changes that are being managed in other future North Hants programmes. These include 2 instances of the registrar system and 2 new committee management systems for the West and North. So hopefully this has given you an overview of what the ICT programme is delivering for vesting day. It has been and continues to be a huge joint effort of all of the authorities, ICT teams and subject matter experts across the service areas to get us to where we currently are and where we plan to be for vesting day.
Thanks, Karen. Chair, if I may, can I just make a couple of sort of summary statements?
Yes, yes.
So thanks, Cheryl, and thanks, Karen. Obviously, that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. I would sort of seek to provide perhaps a bit more sort of reassurance to members in that in the document that we actually sent round, we outlined the governance and where the ICT programme actually fits within the overall programme governance. And where we report in, and that happens on a pretty regular basis. We have had a readiness assessment done by the LGA, and a huge component of that was focused on the ICT programme. They had an ICT specialist as one of the assessors that came in and reviewed our programme, and obviously they highlighted a number of areas where we needed to, potentially put in additional resources or focus. And obviously we've taken that assessment and worked through all those sort of mitigations. I think I'd also just make reference to where we do have amber ratings on any of these programs of work. Amber basically means that we're aware of the risks and we're able to put actions and mitigations in place. And if those mitigations are effective, then there is no issue and it will go back to green. There is nothing in all of these programs which is reporting as red at the moment. So all I would say is this is a continually evolving program, and as we get closer and closer to vesting day, the intensity of the program increases massively. Karen's given you a good view of the MS365 rollout program, which has been a massively intense program of work. Literally virtually every weekend across December and through into early January will be taken up with teams doing the various migrations, working through the weekends, and then reporting, thankfully, each Monday morning that the migrations have gone very well and very successfully. So we just a few to go. That's a massive milestone potentially for mid sort of January. But as I say, it's a massively complex program. But I think the governance processes and system that we have in place hopefully gives you reassurance of the fact that we're on top of things and on track to deliver all we need to do for day one. So happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Richard. Very comprehensive introduction for us, and I think we appreciate now the scale of the work that you're doing and the complexity of it. Obviously, in the pre-meeting that we had, many of our questions revolve around the way members will use the IT systems. So as we go into sort of questions, bear that in mind, that it's been very much from our point of view and how we're going to continue with the work we need to do and how we're going to contact people. So, just bear that in mind as we go through the questions. And first of all, I've got Mike Warren. Mike, would you like to put your question?
Thank you, Chair. My question actually comes in two parts. The first part is, will members be supplied with new IT equipment to ensure that members have the tools from day one? And the second part is, will there be a uniformed approach regarding IT equipment, as this will benefit members and IT officers with their training and delivering the technical support? And this is really going to be required from day one.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. I'm going to refer this one to Cheryl.
Thanks, Richard. There will be two steps to this one. So the first step is going to be, whilst everyone's in their sovereign councils to vesting day, people will be using their existing kit unless it's out of date and unable to support Microsoft 365. And then alongside that, we're doing a piece of work in conjunction with the Democratic Services Workstream, and it's lucky Andrew's on tonight, so there might be some more questions, and if Andrew might want to step in and answer those. But we'll be doing a survey of members to understand how members want to use their IT in future, where their preferences are, and engaging through that way, working with the Transformation Task and Finish group to come up with a proposal for the future unitary service, IT service for members specifically. Then once the elections have happened, that will be enacted for all the members in the West at that point in time.
It just worries me or concerns me that an awful lot of the members are probably using outdated hardware and just haven't got the processing ability to enable all the technical advancements that are coming through to carry them forward. Okay, the internet connection is probably not helping a lot, but I think if there was a uniformity of IT equipment right through members and officers, I think that will be an immense help for the whole of the authority.
I mean, I wouldn't disagree with that at all, to be honest. And I think the survey, well, I'm hoping the survey will draw that out so that we'll make sure that that gets included in the design for the future survey service.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, Mike. Right, James, your question next.
Thank you, Chair. My question is around email addresses. I'm pleased to obviously see that we'll be moving to Office 365 because it's a great platform. But obviously you're going to be creating new email addresses for members and obviously officers and staff. My question really is about the migration of that. So come obviously vesting day, will the old email addresses still be active in terms of those old emails sent to old addresses still be sent to the new ones, if that makes sense? Because we won't want stuff getting lost in the ether. Is my question really. Obviously members will have new emails anyway, won't they? But yeah, that was my question really, just in terms of the migration process and making sure that important communications aren't lost.
Thanks, Councillor Hill. I could probably answer that one, but I'd probably get it wrong, so I'm going to refer to Cheryl again.
No problem, Richard. Yes, all of the so what will happen is everyone will be migrated before vesting days along the dates that Karen explained earlier. So, for example, NBC are the 8th, South Northants are next weekend, and Daventry have already been done. NCC 22nd of January. So what will happen is when your emails are switched over to the new environment, you will be sending email in your primary email account of your Northampton or South Northants or Daventry email address. And in the background, your West Northants email address will be sitting there. And the format will be first name dot last name at westnorthants.gov.uk. And then on vesting day, it is literally just a simple switch across to the new account, but the old one will then become your alias. So when you'll still be able to receive emails to that, all of your historic emails will still be there. But when you send it, any emails, it will be sent from your new email address at that time.
That's great. Now, do we have a plan of how long that will remain active in terms of the old email aliases? Is that something that can just go on for as long as it's needed?
So there's a switch off point where the domain will no longer be allowed by MHCLG, and I believe we have that for up to 2 years.
Okay, so a fair amount of time then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Councillor Ritchie, you've got a question.
Yes, thank you. Firstly, when Councillor Warren was asking his question, it did go through my mind whether new appropriate equipment might extend to a new house for those who are in areas where the internet connection is not good and causes problems. I don't expect that the council would agree to that, but I do feel that there needs to be some sort of contingency built in, a recognition that that the internet connection for many people can be a problem. I mean, not for every meeting, but on occasions, it causes a difficulty. Even in areas where the connection is supposed to be good, things do go wrong. And it seems to me that if we're relying on a system, particularly at the moment when all our meetings are by Zoom, on a system where if there is a fault on a BT line somewhere, then we are sort of excommunicated until they can come and actually repair that fault. However, the question I wanted to raise was really, you talked about the lessons that had been learned from the first districts in which the new system has been introduced. As a sometimes frustrated Daventry member, I would be interested in knowing what has been learned from the changeover in Daventry. You said that Daventry has now been done. I'm aware that some things have been done to me, but I'm not terribly sure what they are or what the advantages are. I get the impression that I'm not alone on Daventry Council in not really having a full understanding of what is the one way, what are the problems in the other sense, what are the potentials of this new change that we are not making use of. And I just feel an awful lot more needs to be done. It's great if people whose expertise is in the technology are coming up with all of these potential solutions. But please remember that many of us are people who are perfectly happy trying to use new technologies, but we need a little bit more guidance, a little bit more hand-holding when you're implementing something that is new and that we don't understand.
Right, who's going to take that one on?
Well, thanks, Councillor Ritchie. I will answer this to a certain extent to start with. As Cheryl has already indicated, all of this switchover is actually happening in the background. You won't notice any difference until we actually switch on day one, if you like. I will ask Cheryl to come in and just sort of go through the sort of outline benefits of the MS365 in a moment. But what I would stress is, because you asked the question about what we've actually learned in terms of these migrations, virtually every system integration, and this is what's adding to the complexity of the program, starts from a different place. So we have 8 authorities, all with different system infrastructures, different software, different platforms, and it's only when we start to get into the implementation of a number of these systems that you start to identify some of the complexities and the difficulties. So it's not an homogeneous sort of environment for us. So every single migration is slightly different, and we can only identify that once we actually get in there and start doing things. So much of this is, in terms of MS365, so much of it is absolutely reliant on it being an organizational change rather than a technical change. And that was one of the things I didn't mention in my introduction. This isn't really about technology. This is an organizational change program facilitated through technology. It's very easy to implement technological upgrades and all that sort of stuff. Where the complexity comes is in the changes in behavior and changes of use, which is basically a human thing. That's where you drive out the benefits of the new systems. But as I say, each of the authorities has started from a different place, so each migration, brings its own sort of idiosyncrasies. So I think in terms of the overall benefits of MS365, I'll just ask Cheryl just to go through those.
Yes, the first phase has been about moving email. So it's probably like, so what moment, isn't it? Just so your email's delivered from a different place and sent from a different place. The next phase will be to start doing some adoption and change. With Office 365 email, there's so much more you can do, and what we can do is federate with other organisations. For the organisation, it means West Northamptonshire, that they'll be able to share information more easily with the wider system, like the police, healthcare, those sorts of things. But internally, there's some really great stuff you can do on internal collaboration, being able to share documents in the same place and work on those documents together. And that will be good for councillors within your different political groups. You'll be able to set up little groups, have conversations around those. But again, we appreciate we need to put some support in place for councillors to be able to do that. It is in the planning. I guess with Daventry going early, you're waiting now for everyone else to have migrated until we can start doing some of that adoption stuff once everyone's in the environment. So bear with, but yes, we have got that on, and we will make sure that we do some activities specifically targeted for members and how members can get value from those different products and platforms to support them in doing their roles.
Thank you, Cheryl. We've got a number of questions actually. Quickly, David Smith, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm pleased to see we're gradually, as we ask the questions, I can tick off my questions, so that's encouraging. I think with a bit of hindsight, I think the questionnaire, it would have been, I'd like to have seen it gone out earlier, because certainly there's issues that we've found at DDC, which I think might have aided other members, and et cetera, et cetera. So maybe even now it might be worth sending out an early one to those that have already migrated across, certainly from an email perspective, because we've certainly seen councillors not getting emails because they've been disappearing into other folders which they didn't create. So I mean, it's really to flag those kind of things as other councils go on or come on stream with 365. Because we've had lots of occasions where people have, and I think all DDC councillors have experienced it. I'm sure. Well, Mike and Ken here, I know they've experienced that. But I'm pleased that the questionnaire is going out. But I think it might have been useful to send it out earlier, so other councils who are migrating can look out for things. I mean, one quite serious one for anyone using a Mac product appears to be that you have to go into private browsing if you've already got an Outlook account for your business or whatever. So all my access to emails is through private browsing for the council, because that's the only way that our IT guys in Daventry are going to sort of muddle something together. So that's that, but it's good that these questionnaires going out. The other question that Ken brought up referenced broadband. Daventry district itself is a very, very rural one, and there's a good chance that some members just won't get decent broadband. So it would be nice to know whether we can investigate other ways of using, whether it be mobile phone technology or whatever else, to get them better access. Because we've certainly, for example, Mike Warren has had problems with bandwidth, so he can't operate virtual backgrounds, which of course, to me, I think that's quite important. Virtual backgrounds, we're all looking into one another's living rooms and things, and sort of a presentation of professionalism. I think it would be better to have at least the option for that. Pleased that the archive of old emails is going to be done. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Right, a number of points you brought up there, David. Is anybody able to come back on those?
Well, I'm not sure there was actually a question in there, David. Was there a specific question, or were just observations?
Well, I think the question really, or not so much. Well, the question referenced broadband access for councillors who are in rural areas. Obviously, if we've still got COVID around, that we're going to continue to have the challenge of broadband bandwidth. So whether we could investigate or have it on a sort of a shopping list to at least have a solution to those members, because it's really quite frustrating. I know Ken's had it on a number of occasions. He's been stopped midstream and had to dive back in because he's been worked out of the Zoom meeting because of technical issues. So it might be, if we were aware when members do have an issue with regard to broadband, whether we basically set them up so they've got something so they can at least conduct the whole meeting, because it causes huge problems. I mean, we've had it in planning, etc., and because I think in the constitution, if you're out of the meeting, if you go out of the meeting during planning, then you can't vote, for example. So we really do need to look at that one.
Yeah. As you'd expect, broadband is probably out beyond the scope of this particular programme. But I will ask Cheryl just to come back in terms of what alternatives there may be, and indeed whether we can explore any of those.
I mean, if it's more stable for people to use like the 3G, 4G connectivity, then we can enable secure access from mobile phones. And again, that's something we can look at as part of the future provision, definitely. And I can talk to the Daventry IT team about some of the issues. I made a note of some of those as well, so we'll be picking that up moving forward. But if you've got a smartphone and once you've been switched over, there's no reason why you can't use your smartphone to access the meetings.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Cheryl. Councillor Roberts, have you got a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Most of the points were touched on, but briefly on the email access from day one. So we'll get the new email address. I understand Microsoft 365. Many of us, I'm sure, use apps on our phones. Certainly NBC, we have the BlackBerry Work app and applications installed. Will we have an immediate transfer over to enable us to have access to our emails on our mobile phones using a similar process? And if so, when I had this put on this phone, I had to go into the office and somebody had to deal with that for me. I couldn't do it myself. So how will we deal with those types of processes? So that's the first question. And then the second question was around providing equipment and people using their NBC or Daventry equipment. At the moment, people will log in different ways there, not just to access emails, but they'll log in to access documents and things that are stored. How will that transition as well as the emails?
Okay, I'm going to let Cheryl do that one.
Thanks, Richard. Okay, so with the phones for NBC, we are currently working on that project. I've been on that project on a daily basis at the moment, so we are aware that there was an issue in rolling out applications to phones without IT touching them. And it will change. There'll be a similar thing. Instead of BlackBerry, you'll have an application called Intune, which will deliver your mail and your other apps securely to your device. And we'll be doing the comms around that very soon. As part of the learning, we've realised we need to offer one-to-one sessions for members. So we're going to be offering some slots on Zoom to be able to have a one-to-one conversation with somebody to help if you need help getting those things set up. We have been writing full instructions on how to do it, but appreciate it doesn't always run according to the script, and people may have problems. So we're going to offer some one-to-one support on the phones. Then in relation to documents and how you log in, that won't change. So everyone will log into their existing systems as they do now for any documents that are stored on the network. But in future, all new documents for the Unitary Council will be stored on Unitary shared folders that everyone within the Unitary can work from. And then we can talk to people about a process for moving those into the shared environment so that you don't need to log on to old networks in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, can I just come back on that really quickly on that last point that you've made there with regards to accessing it from your current equipment? So you're logging in the same way, you can access everything there. We then go to a SharePoint or shared folder file system for the Unitary documents. During that few-week transition period between vesting day and elections, you'll be able to access the Unitary documents from the same equipment in the same way. There'll be full access across there. And again, the installation process, there'll be a one-to-one session to enable people to install that if they need support doing so.
Absolutely. We'll be able to provide some online learning as well if that's required. But yeah, I think for members particularly, we need to target some adoption and change activities around using it as opposed to the getting online and getting logged in. I think that's one step that's quite urgent. And then the next phase is, right, how do we help members make the most of it?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Ken, did you want to come back on anything? I'm conscious we've got to look at the website as well in just a moment.
Very, very quickly, with regards to will there be, it doesn't sound as though there is, but will there be a situation with regards to a big bang approach? If so, what sort of backups and what sort of other security elements are in place to ensure that we don't use any of the communications or services? And secondly, with regards to networks, we've all got our own different networks. Will these be integrated as well?
Sorry, Ken. By big bang approach, what are we talking? Cyber security and cyber threat, or
no? Just the you know what it's like when these should we say very complicated IT projects tend to come live. They do tend to come with a big bang approach. Obviously, by the sound of this, it's going to be more of a step-by-step approach. But what sort of security or what sort of actions are in place just in case we have a major outage or things are not compatible that when we do go live?
Right. So the disaster recovery.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Fine. I know we are building that in, but again, I'm going to ask Cheryl to pick that up.
I mean, there's so many systems going live. Each go live plan has got a step-by-step detailed documented process for whichever system it is that we're doing. If we encounter problems, we've always got a rollback plan to go back to the original state from when we started. And that's in place every weekend. Now, there is a little bit of big bang and little approach. It depends on the system. For Microsoft 365, it's big bang for every council that we're doing. We're doing it all over one weekend. If we encounter problems, we'll be rolling back. We're road testing the migration plans, working with various people to do that. I don't know if that's enough on that one, Ken. If you want me to say a bit more, then
no, that's fine. It's just that that we actually identified that with large IT projects, particularly with the significance of the technologies that's involved here, it's always best to have some sort of regress or backup plan.
Yeah, we're natural pessimists. We always think something's going to go wrong, so we plan for it, and then if you do it well enough, it doesn't.
If I may say, and perhaps it's not too detrimental, is that it tends to happen with government projects.
Central government, not local.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think, sorry, Chair. I think Cheryl's illustration of MS365 and the program that we're going through, we have already mentioned that a couple of those implementation or switchovers actually slipped. And a couple of those, certainly MBC and NCC, which are now into January, was as a result of once we started getting into things and the respective platforms they currently operate on, there were certain limitations that really caused us to sort of step back and take stock and rectify some of those issues before we can then progress. Hence, they've been pushed into January. So it is a very considered approach, Ken.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you. Now, Dennis, were you indicating that you wanted to come in, Councillor Meredith?
Yes, please, if possible, Chair.
Yes.
Throughout the years I've been a councillor, we've had so much with the working groups from scrutiny, so much data saved and different things. What are you doing to protect all that data that's been saved over the years, i.e. working groups which we've taken part in and areas like that?
Again, Cheryl, do you want to just go through the process for once we introduce new systems and stuff? What's the sort of timescales that we'll hold on to new existing systems, and what are the timescales for actually those running out of support?
Yeah, so once everything's moved over, all the existing stuff will stay where it is, and we're working with the information governance teams around what the retention policies need to be for old documents. Some of the stuff that's formal council meetings will be within the committee management systems, and then other stuff might be saved more locally. And we'll just need to work with members around which documents need to be retained as part of formal processes and which ones can be deleted because they're not needed anymore. But we'll work with people over the course of the year following vesting day to move stuff off the old network onto the new one. But I see it as a new wardrobe. So you've got a new wardrobe to put your unitary clothes in and things you might need from the old one, but just leave the old stuff there or delete it if it's not needed.
Okay, thank you. Emma, you wanted to come back on a question.
Sorry, my apologies, I didn't ask it earlier on. I just wanted to ask whether or not the finances that are quoted within the report, whether or not we're on budget for those, whether or not we expect to be within that.
I can definitely take that one. Yeah, absolutely. We've done quite a significant analysis because there is quite a heavy investment associated with ICT and indeed digital. But we've done a huge amount of analysis, and as you can appreciate, with the governance processes that I've said are set up within the programme itself, we come under quite significant scrutiny around that to make sure that we're within budget, and more importantly, I suppose, not only within cost budget, but actually lining up to deliver the financial benefits associated with the programme in the future as well. So yes.
Thank you. Julie, Councillor Davenport.
Yes.
Julie, you're muted again.
Yeah.
Yep, that's good.
So I don't know much about Microsoft 365, but I just Googled it, and it said that Word on Microsoft 365 will translate into different languages. Does this mean that we will be more accessible for our customers who have English as a second language?
Interesting. Richard.
Daryl?
Yeah, I was just gonna. That's a really great question, that one. And yes, it does, but it's also a really great thing for staff as well and for members. And the Translate facility, it's powered by Microsoft's artificial intelligence technology, but it understands speech to text. So if you're not a particularly fast typer, you can use the dictate function and it'll write your emails for you. And it's pretty wonderful, I have to say. Not only that, but you can also have captions on in meetings. So if you don't want the sound on, maybe wherever you are, you turn the captions on and the words will appear on screen, and it even understands my northern accent. So it's pretty good.
This sounds like fun. Right, Ken Ritchie, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a bit, following up the suggestion that was made that a change to Microsoft 365 is not just a technical change, but it's really, there's something that's organizational or cultural about it that means that we ought to do things in different ways. Well, that's something that I would like to see spelled out, because that's news to me. And perhaps for some of us, our problem is that we're trying to do things the old way, using a new system. But where do we go from here? And I just wonder if you're going to be producing recommendations on how the new council and its committees should operate. We're conducting this meeting by Zoom because we're not allowed to actually meet as a committee. But we hopefully will come to a time when, yes, we can all get around a table if that is necessary. But are you going to come up with the recommendations as to what our sort of meeting procedures culture should be? Whether this sort of meeting you're going to recommend should become the norm, or whether you have meetings that are perhaps partly in person and partly remote, and what sort of protocols you will need for that to make sure that those who are accessing remotely are not a sort of outer circle of a meeting. I'd just be interested in what your thoughts are, and whether these are issues on which your group is actually going to make recommendations, or if that is simply going to be left to see what is.
Right, I think we have a broadband connection failure there.
I picked up the gist of that, Chair. So I think in terms of if we're to realise the benefits of a system, then inevitably that demands behavioural change. What is not going to happen is overnight we're going to come in with a heavy stick and say, right, you now need to do it this way. It is going to be very much on the basis of a very softly sort of approach. For the most part, things will not change, but if we are to realise the benefits in the future and the massive opportunities that the likes of MS365 actually provide to us, as I say, in the future, the only way we are going to realise that is by changing some of our behaviours, but it will be on a sort of softly basis. Just in terms of recommending ways as to how we run meetings and all that sort of thing, again, that is very much beyond the scope of the ICT programme. I don't know whether Andrew wanted to comment on that, but that is entirely down to members and the DEM services and the overall governance of the authority to determine exactly how meetings are run.
Yes, Chair, if I can come in, I probably need to add something to what Richard said there, saying that it was entirely down to members and entirely down to democratic services. I think we need to go back to where we were back in February about how you ran meetings then. You had legislation in place about how you ran a meeting and who physically needed to be there, the public being allowed to attend. You then had the coronavirus regulations come in, which said, forget all that. This is where you can do it now. You can do things virtually. And there's quite a bit of flexibility in this to allow you to do that. When your coronavirus regulations go, you will go back to the old set of legislation unless something else is put in its place. So, we will need to be guided by that. your conduct of your meetings is very much guided by law, and so we may have opinions on it. There may be things, smaller things that we can do, but it will need a change in primary legislation before we can actually do some of the things which we are doing now, and perhaps which we like and might wish to continue in the future as well.
That's quite interesting, Andrew, because one of the things that was discussed earlier at the pre-meet was the physical difficulty we're going to have with 93 councillors all over the West Northants area getting into the same place at the same time, and hybrid meetings might be something that would be considered, or meetings in 3 different places joined together by some kind of technology. Meeting in South Northants, meeting Daventry District, meeting in Northampton, that was then linked up in some way. But the protocol, the future protocol of these meetings again was discussed, and I think that is something that is has some urgency to it, because there are very formal ways of holding these meetings and of making decisions. So is that on your agenda? Is that in your thinking?
Well, the accommodation is with George and the day one work stream, so they are looking at that. Bearing in mind that it may be some time before we actually do need to have it, but I don't think that we are in the position whereby you could join various groups up and have those hybrid regulations. I don't think or hybrid arrangements. I don't think that the current legislation allows for that. And that is the kind of thing which we would want to be discussing with MHCLG, the kind of changes we would wish to see for local government as a whole. So, it won't be just a Northamptonshire issue, although we do have the issue of the fact we're trying to get everybody into the same rooms. But, these are the kind of things, if we go back to February and March, or February before we had the regulations actually come in, these were the kinds of things which Buckinghamshire and Dorset also had to deal with. They had to have 200 councillors in the same room and also allow the public to attend, and did put in solutions to allow that to happen, whether or not it was using adjoining rooms for the public or whatever it was. But it's a question really that the day one work stream is actually looking at, to make sure that we've got arrangements in place for that.
Okay, thank you. I'm very conscious of the time. Ken and David have questions. Are these quick questions that can be answered quite simply? Because
if I can make a quick point, I'm grateful, obviously, from the time it took. Somebody gave a very full answer to the last questions that I raised, and for that I'm grateful. I didn't hear any of it though, because no longer, as soon as I finished speaking, I get a message on my screen to say that the host had removed me from the meeting. I hope it wasn't something that I said, but it took me for a while to actually find the email to get back in again. Now, I'm not blaming you for that, but we have got technology in which these things tend to happen. And I feel that whatever procedures we've got to have some robust way of making sure that at critical stages in meetings, we don't have people who are excluded from perhaps being part of a vote or something else. I don't know what went wrong tonight, but suddenly I got that message that the host said, the host had removed me from the meeting. I'm sure that the host didn't, but we've got to make sure that these sort of things don't happen or are exceptionally infrequent.
Thank you, Ken. I think that's a good point to make. Was noted. Right. Could we move on to the website development, because again that's a huge area, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions to raise on that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm going to hand over to Katie very, very quickly. Obviously, this is part of the overall customer contact and digital programme. You've specifically asked about website delivery because obviously that's a critical element of that, and part of the customer front door. So I will hand over to Katie.
Thanks, Richard, and good evening, everybody. Obviously, in the report that's already been circulated, there's a bit of background information, but I just wanted to pick out a few key points before we went on to the slides that we've got. Obviously, the website is one of our key front doors that we've got for our public and for our partners. So it's important that we have something that's very seamless for day one, that is safe and legal. So back in May, it was approved that we'd get a partner to come and work with us, not only to work with us to help develop the website and the actual physical, technical site that's going to be up there, but also to help develop our skills and our sustainability in delivering a website over the next 2 years. For day one, the approach is very much like an umbrella approach for the websites. So there'll be a new West Northants website, but it will be linking back to the old Sovereign Council websites where it's not going to be on the front page going forward. And it's about a journey. So we get the customer on the journey to start utilising the new West Northants website. And within the 2 years, we've got to decommission the old sites. We will gradually build that website to be a fully functioning West Northants website. On the report, you can see there's a little diagram that just explained how that would sort of look, with the county council pages being split between the two, where they can be, to reduce the amount of work. So it's a two-phased approach. We're going to design and build the 2 new umbrella websites, and then the phase 2 then is about having a roadmap where we can decommission and create the one final website. So we've been busy working with FutureGov, who won the procurement exercise with us, and they've been really busy since they started with us sort of mid-October time. Have the next slide, please. So far, they've been doing lots of work with regards to stakeholder mapping, understanding the team, what skills we've got, so internally, and looking at our websites externally. They've been looking at the branding guides and logos that have now been approved, and how that will provide a style tile for the 2 new websites going forward. So in the West, what kind of typography do we want? What kind of colours do we want? Secondary and primary. We've also started doing some user research. So far we've conducted 8 interviews with some staff and some service users, and this is very much on the sort of initial concept of how we're going to be doing our user testing. By the time we get to mid-January, we'll be in full flow on user testing and making sure that we've got representatives from all the different groups available to help us test we'll have a live beta site. So it's a site that is live, and will start to develop, start to show how our development's happening, and we can use the user research to feed into that, so we can take on board exactly what their feedbacks are, make improvements, test it again, make improvements, test it again, as we actually have like a live site, but it'll be private, so it'll only be for those people working on it and engaged in the sort of consultation and engagement. Next slide, please. We've done lots of work with regards to exploring our current websites within West Northamptonshire. There's a big spread of lots of pages, lots of PDF documents on pages, lots of content. And it's about how we streamline that going forward for the 2 new websites. One of the key things that we've also purchased is an accessibility toolkit. So from day one, the West Northants website will be meet the accessibility criteria. And we've got a real strong focus on this. So not only will the website, but we'll also ensure that all content editors have completed some mandatory training on accessibility. So that anything that we put on there, whether it's a PDF or direct contents onto a web page, will meet the minimum criteria that we've got. Next page, please. So the next slide shows you. So it just shows you where we are with regards to doing some kind of mock-ups with the new logos going forward. And it sort of shows the sort of approach that we've taken, which is similar to approach that Buckinghamshire has taken, where we will have the sort of the main web pages, which will then point back to the current Sovereign Council pages until that they are integrated and systems have changed. So, for example, on West Northamptonshire's new website, you'll be able to go on there and search for waste and recycling, if that's the terminology we use, and then to see what dates my bin collection. And to do that, because obviously all different sovereign councils have different bin days. It will ask you what area you currently live in. And then from there, it will then direct you back to the Sovereign Council website. So for a resident in Toaster, for example, it would go back to the old South Northants website with that information on that page. And that web page will be hopefully be rebranded or dual branded with the West Northants logo and South Northants area done on there. Next slide, please. So this just shows you sort of a kind of a mock-up of a simple customer journey on day one of how it will start, how I've described it, the sort of umbrella West Northamptonshire website, and then how it will go back into the old Sovereign Council's websites. There is a link on the slides, so if you want to go and see how Buckinghamshires have done, it's a similar approach to that going forward. Next slide, please. What's really exciting and where we've got to at the moment is looking at our minimum viable product. We've called it MVP. So this is what we need to get onto the 2 new websites for day one to make sure that they are safe and legal. And it's kind of done in 2 phases. So what will happen is the minimal viable product list that we've got here will enable us to decommission these sections from the current Sovereign Council websites, because they will be a unitary wide process. So for instance, on the new websites, we will have a home page with the landing pages and the search pages and a report this and kind of like how your front pages look very similar now. It will also hold corporate information with regards to privacy policies, about us, news and accessibility statements. It will then have some corporate services on there, so about contacting us, complaints and compliments, because there'll be a single policy for them for day one. Same with regards to freedom of information and applying for jobs. Then we'll be looking at the legal and democratic, the registration services, revs and bends, and trying to get as much on that front new page as possible. And less routing back to the sovereign councils. And then there's going to be some necessary content changes that we potentially don't know yet, but will come through as work happens in the other programme areas that we just need to be aware of that might need tweaks or changes for the front page going forward. Then once we've delivered that for vesting day, then obviously the roadmap starts in line with the transformation roadmap of getting all the services onto that current new website going forward. Next slide, please. So this gives you just a bit of an area of how we're doing this. So we're taking an agile approach to delivering the website. So they call it sprints, which really is just some milestones that we have, but we review them every 2 weeks. So that enables us to be able to change and iterate a lot quicker. And if something's not working, we can find it out quicker and fix it. And if something is working, then obviously we can carry on with that. Next slide, please. And this just gives you a high level indicative project plan. So our key sort of milestones that we've got coming forward is to get the sort of the private site live for mid-January. Then the fund can really begin with engaging with service users on how that looks and the development of the customer journeys going forward. Then we should have an initial roadmap of making sure everything else gets onto the new websites by mid-February, and then before hopefully the 1st of April we will have a website ready to launch going forward. Throughout this process, we're obviously really engaging obviously all the website teams within West Northants and all the content management, because sometimes content editors are devolved into service areas. So they are or will be very heavily involved once we start getting onto the content side of things. We're also involved in the change champions. So they'll be able to get engaged, and we are going through the processes with them. We've got the show and tells videos that were available, I think, on your summary sheet, or they were sent out later, which gives you an idea of how fast paced we're going, and we do them every 2 weeks so that we can see where we need to improve. So great to report that we're on track. We're confident that we will be able to deliver West Northants minimal viable product website for day one, so the overarching umbrella. And then we'll have a clear plan of action of how we then, over the next 2 years, will disaggregate the NCC services and aggregate district and boroughs so that we just have one new West Northants website. That's it from me. Any questions?
Okay. Oh, Emma, Councillor Roberts, question from you here.
Thank you. I've got 2 questions. The first one is on the last presentation we had a clear RAG status projections on there. I would have thought for the sprints we would have had RAG statuses and risk mitigation assessments as well. I just wonder whether it might be helpful for us to see it like that if we see it again. You clearly say that you're on track. I've got no reason to doubt you. Very good presentation. Thank you. But I think not having the RAG statuses on that one was difficult for me to then have confidence in the statuses compared to what I did with the previous ones. That's just an observation really on that. And then the second question was around apps. I can't speak for the other councils, but for Northampton Borough we have our app for reporting issues of fly tipping, other instances, etc. How will that work moving forward? There's no mention of that there, or I couldn't see it in the papers anyway. How will we use that? Many residents use that entirely. That's the way they report things. In fact, we're encouraged to do so. So how are we going to use that, and how will that integrate then with, and this might not be a question you can answer, but how will that integrate with the service providers? Because currently that app integrates with Veolia. How will it integrate with other service providers? Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. So with regards to apps, I didn't mention it because it's kind of like we're treating it as a separate project. But with regards to the apps going forward, in the West, it's MBC and Daventry have got an app, and they will stay as they are with rebranding. So your customers will still be able to access them, report them, use them exactly in the same way. And then as we get post-vesting day, it will be a case of looking at our strategy on apps and what we need for them to be going forward, liaising with the service areas and the systems that they then report to in the back office, and how we want to develop that then going forward. So it's very much safe and legal. We appreciate that customers use it as an access channel, and that will remain. Where we can, we will rebrand, and we've got no reason why we can't rebrand it, but the functionality will still remain the same for those users.
Thank you.
Just very quickly, sorry, Jane, can I come back on that point? If it's not rebranded, will there be a communication strategy with people to say it's Northampton Borough doesn't exist, but this app still exists, and we'll have a clear communication for people on that? You're all nodding at me, so that sounds good. But
yeah, definitely. So there'll be some training that we'll do with the customer advisors and some frequently asked questions, that if people do, phone up and ask that, and then also we can do some with the users if we have to. We're hoping that we will get it all rebranded and ready for vesting day. It's just dependent on the third supplier really who's providing your app to make sure that we can. So
another question here from Councillor Banbridge. Dermot, would you like to go? What's your question?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I used to work for Scania, the bus company. I went out to Sweden, worked over there for a while, and I learnt to drive a bus in Sweden. And the bus instructor kept telling me about Tant Greta, and Tant Greta is Auntie Greta, and she's the lowest common denominator. And when I came to stop in a bus stop, I had to stop gently in case she fell over, and I had to make sure she was sitting down before I drove away from the bus stop. Similarly with the website, of course, we are trying to get more and more people involved in it, and those include the Tant Gretas of this world. And one of the things to do that is simplification. And when I saw your example page there, I was a little bit disturbed to see how much copy there was on the page and not how many choices. When we went to the latest SNC website, that had gone through a number of stages in its evolution, and it ended up with a minimum number of large blobs on the page, with things like planning, waste and recycling, etc. on it. And those were listed according to their popularity. So planning was one of the main ones because that was one of our greatest users. People want to look at planning applications, and equally they want to know why their bin wasn't collected on Friday. And you mentioned bins there. So what rather confused me a bit about that was that the pages don't look very user friendly. You haven't got big coloured blobs with a single name in. It's got several choices, and somebody wants to know about bins of waste and recycling, then give them a big blob and then have the next page, and then again, it might mean a couple of extra steps in the procedure, but it saves an awful lot of time. So I just wondered if that was something you were planning to look at, and also looking at the statistics of all the various county, borough and district websites to see the usage, so to make sure that the prioritized, the most popular ones are there and easy to use.
Absolutely, thank you very much for those points. That definitely is our approach, is to keep it simple going forward. We should get lots of this input from the user research as well, which will be very good. I think that those pages on that example are a couple of steps down. They're not what we would have actually on a home page, because you wouldn't want that much text or content. You're very much right. So what we've done is we've got all the data from the current councils within West Northamptonshire. So we know, we've aggregated them together. We know which service areas are the high priority. So that's what we'll be putting forward when we start developing the live site. And then we can then test them, because that's what it was when we collected the data, which was for 1920, sorry. But we do also know that things have changed, and things have changed really quite rapidly with COVID. And that's the data that we also then need to reflect, and experiences we need to reflect. So where services before, you'd probably say weren't a digital service or weren't as high priority digital service, COVID's accelerated the people that are using that. So we also need to factor in some of that practice that's happened in there as well. But definitely, and this is a great opportunity. You know, these are, you know, the most used front doors that we've got for West Northampton, and we've got this real great opportunity to develop these for the future to be the best websites that they can be, without having to just go on what legacy sort of approach that we've got. So they certainly will be developed to meet the needs of the customers as the first priority, not to meet the needs of the business. That will develop as we start integrating back office systems and end-to-end functions.
Right. Thank you. Thanks. Councillor Smith, David, we've got two more questions, and I think we need to move on after that. David, off you go.
Thank you, Chair. I think, yeah, with what Dermot's saying, with respect, it's a bit clunky at the moment, and I'm concerned with the word, so much in the way of words. Is there a plan to use a lot more video, which of course then we can use translation and subtitling as well?
Yeah, I think we should. Yeah, those slides, do you know what I mean, won't be exactly what it looks like going forward. There won't be that amount of content on the side. Where video will be a benefit, then that's something that we'll be looking into. Like I said, we're doing a lot of work with regards to accessibility, so on colours, icons, videos, how that will all work for the best. Do you know what I mean, to make sure that we're as accessible as we are to all audiences going forward. So translation, videos, all that sort of stuff. So it's very much on the radar, and that will be picked up a lot in January, when we can really start engaging some of these hard to reach groups, and see how they actually use a website, what works for them and what doesn't.
Excellent, thank you. Mike Warren.
Thank you, Chair. Have you got a system possibly in place going forward for the sort of uniformity of information to parish councils throughout the unitary, so they've got a good flow of information coming in from the unitary itself, and also enables them to contact the unitary in a user-friendly manner?
Is that specifically with regards to web content that we can then push out onto their sites and for them to use?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so yes will be the plan. You know what I mean, to make sure that everything that we provide on our content is easily usable by other people and they're aware of where it is. We'll be working with the parish councils on where they've got links onto our websites to make sure that the URLs all link up, and that'll be the same with other partner organisations. So there'll be a big sort of a drive for anything that goes onto that front page to make sure that any links that we are, if we link to the police, the fire, the community voluntary sector or whatever, that they're all there and all working, etc. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
We don't want to lose a customer anywhere.
I have just one more question to finish off this section. The unitary is going to be geographically very diverse. Have you considered putting in sort of locality areas within the website, so that if you were, say, in South North Hants, you got South North Hants information very quickly, because it would be different from what was maybe happening in Daventry? And I'm thinking particularly about events, meetings, things that are going on in a particular locality, so somebody didn't have to go through the whole website but could click onto a locality.
Yeah, so that's sort of pretty much how it's going to start from day one. So news will probably be a general bit of news, but things like where events where we can actually filter down, we can look to then say, you know, you go onto the events page and then it will ask you what areas you live in, and then we can then do it from so that people can get, it's all about the customer journey to make sure it's the quickest customer journey that they've got, so they're not trawling through information that they don't need. So yeah, that's definitely something that we'll be mapping.
Excellent. Right, thank you very much, Katie. Again, you know, enormous amount of information and work going on in the background there. If we can move on to the residents campaign now, and I think it's Jonathan and Claire Hazelgrove, Councillor Nunn. Would you like to very quickly just bring us up to date? You've spoken to the committee before, and it's really an update on what's been happening since we last spoke with you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Evening, everybody. Nice to be with you. It is a quick update. One of the things we mentioned before when we gave you an update on the work of the committee was the sort of day one readiness campaign, and how we want to make sure residents have a certain feeling of a reasonable degree of confidence and they know where they might access council services in the future. We're just about starting on that now. We know, though, that your workload ramps up in the new year on the budget and so on. So we agreed to come back a little bit early in terms of the work that we're doing, just to talk to you about how we're going to go about this, really. And then the most valuable thing will be to get from you this evening a few ideas on the things that you think we need to make sure we're highlighting with residents, or at least leave the door open for you to come back to us. So there's a quick summary on the next slide, if we could, please. So we just quickly want to give you an overview of the objectives of our Day One Residents Awareness campaign. We also want to give you a little bit of an example of some of the activities that we think we'll undertake. And then we want to give you an overview really of what we think the next steps will be to make this happen. So largely it's about where are we going with this, and then perhaps getting some of your ideas. Next slide, please. So just to remind you, overarching objectives of this is to ensure that residents in Northamptonshire, West Northants are aware and they feel reasonably confident and positive about the changes to local government in their area. So to that end, we're going to endeavour to ensure that residents know, first of all, that on the 1st of April, their council is being replaced by either the North or, of course, the West Council, and are clear of which applies to them, which area they're in. Get an idea of what will change, and probably crucially what won't change. I think there'll be a lot of continuity and a lot of easy referring, as we've just seen, for example, in the website in the same way. We want them to be aware that services will continue seamlessly, you know, without disruption. There won't suddenly be a change in their bin day or anything like that. Want them to be aware of how they can find information when they need it, and how they can get in touch with their new council. And next slide, please. So in order to do that, what we want to do is come up with a fairly wide-ranging sort of marketing campaign. We'll seek to reach residents in the places that they frequent and wherever they get their news from, whether that's digitally, whether it's through newsletters, and so on. We also have a new team member on the team who has worked on various program similar to this with a marketing specialism. So they've just started, and that will help enormously. What we kind of visualize is we'll do a sort of a long campaign kicking off pretty much now. We're conscious that whilst we thought there's going to be a gap in the sort of news agenda, the virus is very much back on the agenda with vaccination and so on. So we're not too rushed, and we think actually we might really get into this come the new year with a long campaign, and then the short campaign from sort of mid to end February right the way through to the new council starting. What I'll just do at that stage is hand over to Claire, who'll talk you through a little bit about some of our ideas of the long campaign, the short campaign, and then we'll come back, and we're really glad to field both questions and suggestions, really, on some of the things that we ought to be including on this.
Yeah, thanks very much, and evening all. Thanks for the invite. Could I ask for the next slide, please? Thanks. So as Councillor Nunn mentioned there, we're looking at a long campaign and a short campaign for those vital last 6 weeks, really, when things will feel very real to residents, but ensuring that we've got this good, consistent and long-term drumbeat of messaging going out to them from now, really, and then, yeah, scaling up from January. So what will the long campaign look like? So it will have a focused effort to both seize every available opportunity to present key messages to residents, the ones that Councillor ran through there, and through planned items such as residents magazines, and also proactively create opportunities when they arise as well. So for example, December 22nd, if it's not in the diary already, it marks 100 days to go until vesting day. So we want to make sure that, for example, we've got a press release that goes out, we've got video, we've got good social media content and so on. And I think critical to all this is that we want to ensure that there is really good and strong storytelling from a really human, relatable perspective. So, you know, it's not really, it won't be the structural changes piece probably that speaks to residents the most, but it will be how the change will impact them, how it won't, and so on. So where we can find those opportunities to tell those human stories, we absolutely will. I think a really great example of where we did that very recently actually was through a great BBC radio piece around the new adults community hubs, which told that story of change. There was Sydney, a resident whose experiences have really been transformed already through that. And it was a great opportunity as well for Anna Earnshaw to be able to speak more about that broader change coming to West Northants. So we'll look to do more and more of that. So next slide, please, which has got some examples there that I spoke to slightly there before, but those magazines are critical opportunities for us. And so we're working really closely with our communications colleagues across the Future Authority area to ensure that we're seizing every single opportunity and to say, you know, we don't feel we can get across that basic information too many times around, you know, the date, when it's happening, kind of what's happening, and what you'll see as we increase in our volume and frequency of communications, which we absolutely will ahead of vesting day. You'll see that foundational message always be there as a critical piece, because we can't say it too much really. And you'll see at the bottom there an example of when the logo was approved just a couple of weeks ago. Again, we used the opportunity to share the story of the change that's coming, that date, getting out there as much as possible. So we want to be situating people in the change and getting them sort of familiar with the logo and what's to come. So next slide, please. Thanks very much. So then the short campaign. Now this is those crucial last 6 weeks when it feels all very real to people as well. So we'll be, as I say, working on these building blocks from now on, which we very much are. And then this phase will be far more intensive as well. So yes, there'll be those that drumbeat that I've talked about before that will continue, but all of our online and offline activity will really increase in visibility and in frequency with greater tailored specifics for residents as well, so different key groups. But the focus here will particularly be on the opportunities that we create ourselves, so very proactively seeing that crescendo in that drumbeat of messaging and to again meet those critical objectives. So next slide, please. Now, obviously we've got to scope all this, and that's one of the key next steps. But we want to keep everything on the table at this point. We know that there are long lead times for some of these activities, and so we're investigating all of those to make sure that we can make the most of this great opportunity. So nothing off the table, as I say, from trying to look at sports grounds and other sort of high footfall opportunities, assuming and hoping that come the spring we'll be all back outside a little bit more than we are at the moment, but then places like shopping centres, and looking at digital opportunities as well. So there'll be lots of targeted Facebook advertising, lots of, you can do advertising on Google and other places as well. We'll consider things like Instagram for youth audiences too, but then places where people may get their more traditional news online in with those digital spaces, so you can see their opportunities to advertise there. But then getting offline, again, critical as well. So are there opportunities within libraries, for example, to make clear to people kind of what's not changing there, that they'll still be able to use their services as they know how to at the moment, utilising opportunities, touch points with residents like community centres as well. And then we'll consider things like leafleting in the key areas too, and so there are opportunities that will present themselves to us as well. So for example, with the council tax bills, being able to insert a piece of information in there as well to let people know what's coming. As I say, very much just examples here, but we want to show you the scale of our ambition. So next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of tactics, then, so we talked through our objectives, strategies, so now onto the how, really. And so these will absolutely be tailored by our audience, but our plans very much include a range of activities here. So using targeted digital and offline channels, as I've mentioned, to reach those identified audience groups. What we think is really critical, and I know that you do too, because this came through very strongly in our last meeting with you on our broader sort of communication strategy, but just working with a range of message carriers to ensure that we're reaching the greatest number of people possible. So thinking through, yes, members, obviously, in the great role you and your colleagues can play, but also community leaders of different forms as well, and businesses, high profile influencers. And we know that friends and family are really critical as well. And we're also thinking through how can staff be ambassadors for this change as well within the communities that they're a part of. So again, we can best reach people in the places where they already are, rather than trying to expect them to come to us with everything else that they have on. And so we'll also be identifying opportunities to involve and engage residents in a meaningful way. I think crucially trying to identify opportunities through our creativity and innovation with how we go about this campaign to garner some earned media interest as well. And that's to say, one of the key pieces that we'll talk about in a second is the what's next and how do we get there. But we very much want to be the future authority that when other councils are in future thinking about and looking at moving to a unitary approach, that they come to us and look at West Northants and think, well, they did something pretty great there, actually. We'd like to match that ambition and that creativity. So we're setting the bar high for ourselves, but we very much want to think it's the right place to place that. So next slide, please. And I think that's back over to Councillor Nunn.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, so just to finish then, I mean, some people we have mechanisms of reaching all of them. The Daventry Calling magazine is well read by all households. The other example you saw there, Northampton Partnership Homes. These are people who have quite a close relationship with the council, and we were able to put something already so that all Northampton, the many thousands of Northampton local authority tenants who may have cause for concern, what will happen, who will I speak to, and so on, have all had that question answered. So a lot of this is about reaching people who have legitimate concern and a need to know, and finding the best way to be in touch. So consequently, we are already gathering insight from other unitary authorities, what they feel they did well and what they feel they did not do so well, so we can learn on those experiences. And that's giving us quite a template of potential ideas and opportunities of who we need to reach. Next step then is to map all those audiences across the future authority and work out which are the best ways to reach them and to get to them. Pull together a sort of full range of potential channels and opportunities so that every single potential area of resident need is met by a few different ways of trying to reach them. We'll then have to shape up a bit of a budget to make sure we've got that covered, but it is considered a priority to make sure that people have this peace of mind as to what's going to happen next. There'll also be messages coming out to key message carriers, such as Claire mentioned, members, partners, community organisations, and so on. And each of our 4 councils has quite a good network of getting ways out to different sort of community type groups and different areas of the community. We'll work with them to develop the test messages so that before we put something out to a particular community, we'll ensure their input guarantees that it's gonna hit it in the right way and be clearly understood. And then finally, a bit of a timeline of activities so we can map out clearly exactly what's going to happen when. So perhaps hopefully what we've given you there is a quick update. Perhaps what we've given you is an assurance that we're onto it, and perhaps what we've given you is a feeling that we have got a process to get there. I'm happy to answer any particular questions. What we've now got to put behind it is the next level of detail. But similarly, if you had any specific suggestions of areas or groups of residents that might particularly worry you about how they're going to be informed, very happy to take those suggestions from you too. Thank you.
I have a question before we started this, Jonathan. Obviously, we've got greatly diverse communities with different languages. Are you going to be putting leaflets into mosques, temples, community centres in a variety of languages so that people do understand? Because not everybody has English as a first language or can access it as easily.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And perhaps you and I have worked in the communities around Northampton. We know particularly that perhaps of the whole West, we have greater sort of diversity. And as you'll know, we have pretty good contacts throughout, various different groups of different ethnicity, actually many of which were built up even more strongly during COVID with the various different multi-language sort of leaflets that we put out. So the answer is yes, and we would absolutely say that we're going to exploit every communication channel every council has. So all of the channels and forums and different organisations, Jane, that we have at the borough, will certainly be using all of those and using appropriate language to make sure that people get the message. Definitely.
Excellent. Right, we have a number of questions for you. Ken Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things when I've been talking to various people that have passed by my house, which, if I may say, at distance, a significant amount of them don't really understand or in fact even know about the unitary scenario that's going to happen to them next year. Something that I was quite impressed with is that NCC sent round a leaflet with regards to the virus, and things to do and not to do, which arrived earlier this week. Should we be thinking about doing a similar sort of situation with regards to telling people about what is actually happening on the 1st of April next year, and just telling them about the combination and the 2 councils and so on and so forth?
If I may, yes, I agree with you entirely, Ken. I see this at 2 levels, actually. To some extent, for a lot of people who aren't closely interacting with the council over anything particular, so they aren't, for example, benefiting from an adult social care package or anything of that sort, then in a way we've done our job right if it's pretty seamless. The bin lorry continues to turn up on Mondays and so on. What we have got is the opportunity of a blanket message through the council tax bills, which go out at about the right time of year. So you absolutely rest assured there'll be something fairly thorough in that. But almost for quite a lot of people, in my view, yes, they need clear information, but if we do the job right, it'll be oh, by the way, it won't be vital. The people probably that worry me more are those where either they have quite not such a directly close relationship that they're getting regular contact over care package, but they've got an occasional relationship, and so they need to know, or maybe even it's those whose vulnerability will mean that is of concern to them. So they worry about what will happen in the new world. Those are the people for whom we've got to provide reassurance. But just to be assured, every single household will get some kind of informative leaflet that gives them an indication along with their bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John.
Right.
If I may add on to that, actually, I think that's completely right. Most people don't know what's going on, do they? They're so busy in their day-to-day lives, plus COVID, plus a complex Christmas. It's a tough time to sort of make other messages cut through, but I really do feel, and the conversations we've had as part of the Task and Finish group on comms engagement, have been quite helpful with this. So I think we all collectively feel that come the new year, it will become the year of the unitary in a sense. And so I think people's minds will be more open and sort of it will be a more real an upcoming change that's happening. And so I think it makes it more of a ripe opportunity then for us to be able to sort of see the messages. But again, I don't think that we can say it too many times, particularly those basic nuances around, you know, the date, what's happening, what the future authority will be called, the logo, how to get in touch, find information, just the basic touch points. I think, as ever with these things, right, it's when you're hearing when people come by socially distantly by your house and say, I've had enough of this, I keep hearing about this authority, that's when we know that we're beginning to cut through. So that's what we'll be aiming for.
I also, just very quickly, not just on social media, I think it has to be, because there's a fair amount of our residents that don't really use, you know, Facebook or YouTube or any of the social medias. I think it's got to be in, you know, sort of black and white to them.
Yeah, could I also add to that, Claire and Jonathan, information about the elections, because people are going to be electing, you know, 3 councillors to a division, and they're going to have 3 councillors to refer to, and you know how the parishes and the town councils fit in with that. I think that's something that, again, people really are very unaware of, that they are going to have 3 councillors to represent them in their division, and you know all these the unitary, the town, the parish, and the police and fire crime commissioner is all going to happen at the same time. You know, that's a really big ask of people in terms of their you know, electoral you know, the way that the election is going to be running, and that's obviously, you know, crucial to the unitary as well. Yeah. We have a question from James here. James Hill, Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the update, Claire and Jonathan. Really useful to hear. My question was regarding social media, which Ken just briefly mentioned, but obviously there is some current Future Northants social media ongoing. Really, my question was around engagement, like engagement you've had so far. I'm guessing obviously you've got kind of stats around that, but really I just wanted to have a brief summary of how much engagement has been going on, and has it been successful in terms of the reach that you've been getting throughout the county?
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, everything that goes out, of course, on Future Northants is also then shared across our existing councils networks as well. So I think people are latching onto it. I don't have any stats at all. I think it's reasonable take up, Claire. Is it? Would you know anything on that? Or?
Yeah, there is. No, it's a good question. So when we do post content, we find a good level of interaction. In fact, a good example actually would be the logo survey itself. We found that the majority, it was the largest or most common route through which somebody participated was actually through our social media channels, and that was the most sort of highly participated in survey that had been done in a long time. So I think that proved that it was an effective channel. That said, obviously that's also supported currently. What our approaches with social media is, say the Future Northants account sends out a tweet, we then encourage and will tag the existing sovereign authorities in that post as well, so then the comms leads there can reshare that to residents who already have following them too.
Excellent, that's great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Emma, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. I've got a few points. I'm going to take that point on stats first, because if you look at the Future Northants Facebook, there's not a lot of interaction on that. So I'm guessing your take up is then from the follow-on Twitters or tweets or shares, if you like, because there's quite a lot of shares, which is obviously the other authority sharing it, but there isn't a lot of interaction on there. I don't know how we improve that necessarily, but I think that would be a good place to improve. And then another observation just around when you gave the update last time, Claire, I love your enthusiasm. I think if you were working alongside you, it's kind of what's the word? Can't think what the word is. I'm trying to get infectious. It's there. It's really good to hear. But I don't feel like we've got a plan. I feel like you have in what you want to do and what you want to engage with, but I don't feel like we've got a timeline. Whereas with the other 2 programs that we've seen tonight, there is a project or a RAG status, as I said earlier, that gives an understanding of how we get there. So I know in the report it mentioned there would be a timeline, and I know you're getting to that as the next stage, but I think feels to me like we've got to get to that bit quicker. It's not a criticism and not intended to be a criticism. It's an observation.
I mean, if I just chip in on that one, I think you're absolutely right, Emma. We make no pretense that we got every last line. Councillor Birch and myself had a chat because I said, well, I think we're a bit early to come to you, really, and can we come to you in the new year? And it was that point about the budget work that you guys have got to do in the new year. So yeah, no, I'll be absolutely honest. If you hopefully think that we've got a decent chance of putting a good plan together, that's about as far as we can take it, I think, for us to take any suggestions from you. But no, the aim is to make sure we're pretty careful and pretty methodical with a line by line.
Okay. Okay. Then the other points I had were around the groups that we're going to talk to and we're going to speak to. That looked great compared to last time. It looked like we understood who we were going to talk to. That was really good. I just thought of people like Community Law, Citizens Advice Bureau, food banks and community larders, because a lot of those people and the people who either service those areas or volunteer in them are talking to the most vulnerable people who may be our service users, who may be really interested in what's happening on day one because they need to know who to contact. So I think speaking to them would be really important. And then the next point on linked directly to that is our service users who have got a direct contact, like somebody who's got an adult social care program or somebody who's got a housing support officer or somebody who is just talking to our customer service team. I have a number of residents who just our contact centre talk to and are helping out. So if they've got a name of somebody and that name is going to change post the 1st of April, how do we communicate that to them? How will those individuals be told? I think that's absolutely essential. And then, Jonathan, sorry, you mentioned something that frightened me a little bit, and you said we've got to shape up a bit of a budget. I just wonder, have we got a budget for this? Where is that budget coming from? And we are sure that we're going to be in line and we're not going to be frightened by that later on. Sorry, I know there was a lot there. But
no. Shall I take that last one? You're quite right. It was informal language. There is money for this, Emma, and there won't be a lack of communication as a result of that. You're quite right. It was a rather blasé sort of phrase. Please be assured there's money there to do this without any doubt at all. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there absolutely is. It's a case of identifying through this mapping that we're doing at the moment around different channels and opportunities, quite literally where to place the different components based on how best to reach the key residents groups. So that's the part that we're mapping out when it comes to the budget at the moment. But absolutely, we're covered on that front. It's it's an important thing. We've got to absolutely be able to get out there and talk to people. You're on a couple of your other points there as well. So no, thank you for those groups. I think those are absolutely critical ones, as you say. They're sort of at that sharper edge, perhaps as well. So critical to receive all that information. The customer services team we're already working with, and we're part of a conversation actually earlier today with them about the fact that they could be a really helpful way of being able to test some of the language that we're thinking of using, because they'll know the language with which residents are speaking with them and the kind of questions that they have and so on, just generally, and it'll be through them. And as part of the broader customer program, we're working really closely from a communications perspective to identify who needs to be communicated with about what change and when. So we're absolutely on the case with that, and really mindful of it as critical groups of people who can't sort of be seen to fall through or not have that communication when they are closest to the council in so many ways. And your good point on Facebook, absolutely. The Future Northants accounts aren't the biggest ones by any means. What we're trying to do, because we don't want to sort of suck away an audience for Future Northants from the sovereign authorities when that will only change again to the future authorities ones. So that's why we're working on that principle of focusing on the sharing rather than sort of the direct sort of commentary as such. So that's the stat that we're looking at and wanting to keep going up ahead of the changeover. But it'll be a critical part of our comms approach. As I mentioned, at least the beauty of particularly Facebook and Instagram, which we'll keep in scope for now and assess how helpful it will be for this campaign. But it will allow us to really target people in quite a nuanced way to ensure that we're reaching them. The same with things like Google ads as well, and then ads that we can place with other sort of local networks to ensure that we're getting as wider reach as we can.
Thank you. Right, I'm really conscious of the time now. Ken, Richie and Mike, have you got quick, succinct questions to be answered very briefly?
Can I fire three very quickly. The first, obviously, you've got to use the one communication that goes to all residents each year, the council tax bill. You're in a position where you're going to give them a bill saying that your council is going to cost you a lot more, alongside something saying that you've got marvellous council that is coming up. People will not all have been exposed to Claire's positivism about this, but how are you going to do that in a way that is actually realistic? You're telling them you will have a new council, and they will assume, yeah, we've got a new council and it's going to cost us a lot more money. Secondly, I just wanted to take up the 3.5.3 in tactics. You talk about identifying opportunities to involve and engage residents. I don't know what that means. Do you mean that you want to communicate effectively? The use of involve and engage suggests you want to do something more than merely communicate, but I don't have a picture of what it is. And if we do mean something more than communicate, what is it? What are we actually expecting to get as a response? My guess is that the response that you will get will not be entirely positive. I suspect that a great number of people will take the view that they couldn't actually care less what sort of council we have or where it is. And I think that so that we are not unduly disappointed by our efforts, do we have a baseline against which you are going to measure the success of your communications work?
Is there a quick answer to that, Jonathan? Jonathan, you're muted.
Sorry. On a quick one, council tax. Look, it's not our job necessarily to lock horns. There is council tax harmonisation. Sadly, means in some areas people will be paying more, in others they'll be paying less. It's not necessarily the job of us to present a long argument as to why that's good news. The key thing is that people know what's going on. They might know where to contact, and I don't think we would necessarily be the right people to get into an engagement to convince them that it's quite right that if they are paying more, they should. But the opportunity of using the bill absolutely can, as I mentioned earlier, will definitely use that opportunity. How will we know our success? Well, there will still be people, if we send hundreds of messages out, who soon after hadn't realised there was a new council. But let's hope the mechanisms are in place that if they search Northampton Borough Council, they get automatically diverted to the website, or if they phone, they get automatically diverted by phone. So that's the answer. But I think the real success will be that people will feel a certain feeling of reassurance. There won't be vulnerable people who feel frightened and scared, and what will it mean for them? And that generally the number of confusing calls that are received after we've got into unitary will be minimal. It is a gradual change. It won't be a sudden 1st of April change, and the same people will be doing the same jobs and contactable on the same numbers. But I guess a measure of our success is how many people are running around in a panic afterwards because they hadn't heard anything about it and they're worried about it. That I guess will be the precise measure. There was a second question I'm not sure I picked up on. Blair, have you got anything else?
Yeah, on the sort of involve, engage people, absolutely. Very intentional language, because that's it's an aspiration for us around this. So it's not just broadcast. I think while people need to know what's going on, if there are ways, like for example, with the logo survey, now that wasn't a formal consultation. That wasn't something that, for example, we had to do, but it was the decision to include as many people, as many residents, staff, stakeholders as possible, and that made it a very fruitful process. And was actually really instructive in terms of what we ended up doing with the logo. And in fact, with the rose shape change, actually came from the public, which was great. And small things and small opportunities we've managed to identify, like actually we put out just on social media, again, didn't have to do it, but saw it as an opportunity to engage people around you. Select from these phone numbers for your future authority and so on. So we'll look for just small sort of places where people can get involved if they want to. But I think you're quite right. Most people don't want to. That's fine. And this is there for the people who do want to. There'll also be ongoing consultations in that formal sense, so around the budget, for example, and council tax was mentioned as well, those formal consultations. So we can benchmark those and sort of interaction engagement with those versus previous years. And so that will be something that we look to do where possible as well through existing like residents magazines. We've been working with the communication leads across the authorities to look at opportunities where, well, how can we do exactly that. How can we benchmark our success? Because we want to know if we're doing well with this. And so where in previous years, if in resident surveys, and where, for example, a year ago, there were some questions in there around sort of awareness of the changes that were coming. We've done very similar questions again this year, so we can hopefully again, to your point, benchmark a bit of that and hopefully see an increase on last year. And then again, we'll look to do that afterwards and assess where people are at. But absolutely, as Councillor Nunn says, it's that sense of people feeling confident and sort of aware of what the changes are and hopefully enthused. I think that's our benchmark.
Thank you.
Right. Mike, a very quick question from you and a very quick answer, I hope.
I'll try to be as quick as I can. I'll be try as quick as I can. It's actually just expanding a little bit on the chair's comments. Are you going to be able to inform every resident on day one who their 3 local members will be and their contact details? Because there's going to be an awful lot of residents that don't use the internet and don't use social media.
I think there's an important job to do. I didn't mention Chair's comment, you did right. There's an important thing to do, particularly given the fact that we can imagine COVID will mean that information and door knocking will be more limited. There is something important to ensure democratic involvement, isn't there? So there will be a part in us communicating that elections are coming up, keep your eyes out for it and so on. In terms of then who are the councillors, interesting one. I suppose our current thought is up to the time of the new council coming in. I therefore wonder if we should highlight that as something to ensure that the new council does it as soon as it kicks off. I think not currently part of our work, Mike, but no, I think you're right. And of course, in many instances, there'll be people who are existing councillors, aren't there? So there'll be a certain level of continuity. But yeah, that would be a recommendation for us, for the new council to pick that up, I think, Claire, wouldn't it? What do you think?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Right, let's move on very quickly to item number 9. Andrew, you've been waiting very patiently. We'll just go quickly through the overview of scrutiny work programme for moving into 2021. Andrew, could you just take us through this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, it's been a busy meeting tonight, and that's reflected in the work programme here as well. But of more interest now will be the meetings in January. You have one on the 12th of January, which is solely to do with finance scrutiny. So you'll be undertaking the review of the budget. And then on the 25th of February, you have the similar kind of meeting, but that will be to do with governance, i.e. the Constitution. So that's the major work areas which now this committee is looking to complete. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And we've got observers obviously on both of those task and finish groups, and at the pre-meets for those meetings, the task and finish group representatives, observers will be able to feedback and help us understand some of the work that's been going on. Right, finally, Andrew, we have the West Northants forward plan, executive forward plan. Would you be able to just very quickly give us a brief resume of where we are on that?
Yes, absolutely. So there are still a number of meetings for the shadow executive to take place here, but again, they will be concentrating on the same areas as the overview and scrutiny will, with one exception. Obviously, they'll be looking at the finance arrangements and the budget. The budget and the Constitution. But it also should be noted that there are a number of policies to come through and strategies to come through as well. It's a very comprehensive list. I have been asking questions as to whether or not all of these need to go to shadow executive. And are still waiting for some answers, because I did agree with shadow executive members right at the beginning that the ones that come through to shadow executive would be those that require some political direction or have a significant impact on the community. But for completeness, we have still included them on the forward plan, because it is easier to take them off a forward plan than what it is to actually look to put them on again in future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Right, I think that brings us to the end of tonight's agenda. it's been a very full meeting, and I thank you all very much indeed for your participation and the officers for facilitating this. There is no urgent business and there are no exempt items. So thank you very much indeed, and well done everyone. It's been really useful from my point of view, and I do wish you a very good evening.